website. So I think we'll continue to try to record our presentations. As Paul has said earlier, it really helped during the recording that if your mic is open, to go ahead and mute it, because anytime the recording picks up some noise, it will flip to your screen. So if you could do that, and like Paul just said, it may help with your video quality, your camera image quality, if you also turn off your video. We may have some problems in terms of bandwidth at your local level. If you have questions and all that, please use the chat box. And at the end of every one of our segments, we'll take a look at what the questions is in the chat box, and we will answer those questions that you may have. I was hoping that perhaps we can welcome David Bellamy and Robert. They had signed up all the way from England. Maybe they will join us a little bit later on. The other thing I just want to share with you, we are in the process of doing our best to plan for the 2021 season. So we'll be challenged short term in terms of just understanding what the rules of engagement is going to be like. But I want you to be assured that as an organization, we want to make sure whatever we organize will have your safety and any of the public and our own safety in mind. So keep an eye on our website. We'll make announcements there, but I think we're also going to just keep sending you emails throughout the summer. We will try to put a whole complement of meetings and events for next year, but we just don't know how this particular virus is going to affect us locally and probably around the country. We'll have, for example, if we have presenters scheduled to come in, they may or may not be able to do that. So we'll plow in all the learnings that we gather from these meetings, virtual meetings, and we will probably continue with recording and some element of the virtual capability going forward. Okay. Again, thank you all for joining us this morning, and welcome. So we really just have three things we want to cover today with you. We have one element in terms of our chapter business we need to conduct. We have a couple of bird sightings that we like to share with you, and then Patrick Donnelly will do his presentation, and we'll close. In terms of officer installation, we have 3 officers to put in place. So let me just take some time and go through this. So the mission of the Red Rock Audubon is to bring people together for the conservation and enjoyment of birds and other wildlife and the natural world throughout Southern Nevada and the neighboring area. That's our mission. So recently, we are all seeing an all-out assault on our environmental laws and also our conservation norms that have been designed to protect birds, our environment, and also our democracy. Our challenge is to take action so that all concerned voices in our community are heard. 120 years ago, Harriet Hemingway and Mina Hall's parlor movement to stop bird hunting for fashion led to the beginnings of the National Audubon, and more importantly, the passage of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. I think all we have to do now is to be like Harriet and Mina. Birds are signaling to us to save our environment for all of us. So with this in mind, it's my pleasure to install the following new officers of the Red Rock Audubon chapter. Jimmy Alexander, as secretary, it's your responsibility to chronicle the business of our chapter through complete, accurate, and timely minutes of all meetings. It is also your duty to keep all chapter records and carry on the correspondence for the chapter. Do you pledge to fulfill the duties and responsibilities of secretary and to serve the members of your chapter to the best of your ability? And
I do.
Thank you. Kathy Cosmer, as vice president with your co-vice presidents, it's your responsibility to preside at all meetings of the chapters and serve as president in the absence of the president. As vice president, it's also your duty to oversee the programs for chapter meetings. Do you pledge to fulfill the duties and responsibilities of vice president and to serve the members of your chapter to the best of your ability? If so, say I do.
I do.
Thank you. It is now my distinct honor and privilege to install the person whom you have elected to lead our chapter as president. As president, your duties and responsibilities are vast and varied. As the chief executive officer of this chapter, it is your overall duty to ensure the organization has the capacity to deliver the chapter's mission and goals. In conjunction with the board of directors, keep the chapter's vision, mission, and goals relevant and current. As president, you will preside all meetings, appoint committees, and shall represent the chapter at official functions. Do you pledge to, and this is, by the way, Paul Rodriguez, do you pledge to fulfill the duties and responsibilities of president and serve the chapter to the best of your ability? If so, say I do.
I do.
So at this time, it's my pleasure to present the president of the chapter, and I now turn the chapter's leadership over to you. Congratulations, Jimmy, Kathy, and Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Yay.
Thank you.
And I just want to say it's been a pleasure and an honor serving you guys, but it is also so important for all of us to understand this is, as I shared with you 6 years ago, this is our chapter, this is your chapter. It's not going to be up to just Jimmy, Paul, Jennifer, Kathy, Carol, Cantino, and Paul. It's all of us have to step up and take on the responsibility of making sure our community really gets represented, all of the people, and we protect our environment here and the birds. So thank you all.
Thank you, Doug. And if I can just say something real quick here, I want to thank you for your leadership over the years, and I think because of you, this chapter is moved into a new era, and hopefully we can keep that up, keep it going, and improve, and just be a force in our community for good. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Paul.
Same here, Doug. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kat. So interesting bird sightings. I would just say that I am now totally convinced the only real difference between past years in terms of our bird sightings is that we are in our backyards and we are in our community, and we're finally opening our eyes and ears and we're seeing these things, right? So Andrea had a really interesting sighting. So Andrea?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Doug, I think you wanted me to talk about the flycatcher.
Yes.
Okay, I will do my best. Flycatchers are, well, lots of birds are still difficult for me to identify, but flycatchers in particular, except for a couple of real obvious ones. On a really windy day a few weeks ago, I spotted a bird in my tree in my yard. We have a couple of chase trees in our yard and a bunch of little shrubs between them. And it was just kind of hanging out in there, and I could immediately tell it was a flycatcher, but I couldn't tell what kind. So I managed to, stare at it for a little while with my book in hand. And I thought I had it pretty well winnowed down to Dusky or Hammond's flycatcher. I reached out for some help. Maybe I should pause and just say the reason I was thinking it was one of those was kind of its size. It had kind of short, I forgot what the outer layer of wings were kind of short relative to like the length of the tail. But even in the book, both of those two birds have a little bit of that going on, and the experts on the call could correct me in the lingo I'm using there. Anyway, it had a little. It did not have the vest. So if you have your field guides handy, there's a difference between Dusky and Hammonds, where the Hammonds have a little bit of looks like they're wearing a little part of a three-piece suit with their olive color and their white color on their chest, and then the dusky does not have that. And so that's what I thought, but apparently that's not really the most defining feature. It really is their apparent wing length relative to like the length of their tail. And so experts were able, with some help with pictures that I shared, to get me to dusky flycatcher. So anyway, very long-winded way of saying that was a pretty exciting bird for me to see, especially on a really windy day. It was kind of hunkered down and it didn't leave its perch for a while, and when it did, it went right back, and I probably had a good 20 minutes to look at it. So it was exciting.
Wow.
So don't give up even on the windy days.
Thank you so much, Andrea. What Andrea had the challenge with is, I think we all will be challenged. We talk about this class of flycatchers they call impids, and you have the dusky, you have the Hammonds. I think there's also like the Pacific Slope. It just they are very, very challenging in terms of getting a good feel for the little details. And some people will say probably the most definitive way to identify these birds is by their voice. So you're lucky, Andrea, to have this bird be around for that many minutes, so you can actually get to the details. I think from a bird identification standpoint, impids and those little brown jobs, and then gulls are probably the three really difficult ones. Cool. The other one I want to share with you, this was just shared recently. This is in our neighborhood on one of the walks, one of our neighborhood parks. This is a photo that's taken these birds with an iPhone.
Hey, Doug.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you, but your screen is black. We don't see anything.
You don't?
No, I'm not sure if that was your intent, but that's
No.
what we're seeing right now, or at least I'm seeing it, and Debbie's is the same.
Same. So there we go. Now
You
we
see
can
it?
see it.
Oh, I don't
No, we
see
see it.
anything yet. So
Yeah, it's back for me as well.
okay. Well, maybe it's just me then.
No, it was out, Paul, and now I don't know why you can't see it, because when he did whatever he did, I can see it now too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I just see black. So, all right, go ahead. Sorry.
So you guys, can you identify what this bird is? These birds?
Some kind of ibis.
Yeah, I think it's one of the ibis. Is probably most common one is the white face, but this is on a ball field. We were, I was really confused. But then this morning I went to the Audubon website, and it talks about these ibises sometimes get on like wet kind of grasslands. Okay, what they're looking for is earthworms. Like I said, just get out and pay attention, and these birds are going to give us some really new pieces of information. It was a learning for me. I always thought that ibises was going to be near water, but not necessarily. And I'm going to share with you this next picture. These were two photos I took in Australia. These are the Australian white ibises, okay? And these were at a park. And one of I think one of the things we need to be aware of is birds tend to interact with us. They learn to interact with us. So these ibises eat and just like our white-faced ibis, they are in water. They're on ponds, but these have gotten used to getting scraps from us. And if we project out as we get more and more urbanized and these birds come visit us, one of the watch out is us training them to depend on us. I read something, and I want to share with you. I think it was this morning or last night, that in our cities, I think this was in New York City, they're finding that the gulls are actually eating rats and other things like that in the city, because they are, without people feeding them the scraps, they are actually eating other things that's in our city. So just recognize that the birds are kind of really in tune with nature, in tune with our urban environments. So we really got to be mindful of our practices. So I was really surprised by these birds' behavior in Australia. Okay. Any questions that popped up, Paul, in the chat box on this section? No? Okay. Let's move on. So let me introduce you to the subject and also our speaker. So we're going to get to know more about the Clark County Public Lands Bill. Clark County has been working on a federal lands bill for Southern Nevada for the past several years. All versions of the proposed congressional bill have sought to expand Clark County's development boundaries in exchange for the creation of new conservation area. The Clark County Commission approved a set of principles for the lands bill in June of 2018. The county's requests have been criticized by environmental organizations, which have called its recipe for sprawl and poor air quality, as well as a threat on rare and endangered species. So we're going to learn more about this bill and the actions we can take to protect birds in our Mojave Desert. Our speaker, Patrick Donnelly, is Nevada State Director for the Center of Biological Diversity, where he advocates for the Silver State's public lands, wildlife and plants, water and climate. He spent almost a decade leading desert tortoise habitat restoration projects, guiding backpacking trips and rock climbing in the California desert before heading to UC Berkeley for school. In the past 5 years, he's lived in the North Mojave Desert outside of Las Vegas. He enjoys nature, photography, native plants, hiking, the desert peaks, and hot springs. And thank you, Therese, for introducing me to Patrick. This is our last presentation for this season, and we wanted to do it to kind of leave this whole information with you to think about over the summer, because when we come back, I think we're going to need to think about what elements of this message do we want to address next season. And I'm so glad Janice Schwinn is also on the call today, because I think this element should be part of our advocacy committee work. So Patrick, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think I've taken over the presentation already.
Okay.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. I'm going to keep my video off. I'm running off of my cell phone right now because my internet is down, and so I have limited bandwidth. So sorry, you're not going to be able to see my pretty face, but there you go. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about the Clark County Lands Bill and conservation of endangered species in Southern Nevada. People have a conception of Las Vegas, and I think we all know what that popular conception looks like. It's a lot of neon and fountain shows and the Strip, and maybe if people squint at the photos the right way, they might know that there's some mountains in the background. But I think all of us on this call today, are aware of a different Southern Nevada, a place that's really rich with incredible landscapes and public lands like Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area and Lake Mead that most of us go to visit, and certainly the Desert National Wildlife Refuge, which is so iconic right now in the fight to prevent the military from taking it over. And there's a tension between those two things, between the glitz and glamour and development here in Southern Nevada and the public lands that surround us. And so this sequence of photos of satellite imagery is probably familiar to you all. The dramatic expansion of urban and suburban development in Southern Nevada over the past 50 years. It's gone from, a little more than a truck stop with a few resorts to, a city of 2.2 million people, the largest city in the Mojave Desert, and eating up, many thousands of acres of high quality desert tortoise habitat and other species habitat in the Las Vegas Valley. And a lot of that has been ordained by what we call SNPLMA, the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act. And SNPLMA was passed in 1998. And it drew a boundary around the valley. And it made it such that public lands within that boundary were subject to disposal. So disposal of public lands means selling them out of the public domain to private entities for development. And so you can actually see that SNPLMA in some ways has worked. You see the boundary here on this map, and then we'll go back to the satellite. And you can see that on the right-hand map here, that area of land roughly corresponds to the SNPLMA boundary. And so while on the one hand, Las Vegas has experienced this tremendous growth and sprawl, and it's caused problems, and we'll talk about those problems. On the other hand, there is a natural geographic boundary around this valley, and the SNPLMA boundary was drawn to reflect that. There's mountains on the south, mountains on the west, mountains on Lake Mead on the east, and the desert refuge to the north. It constrains growth to some degree. But the growth we've experienced already has caused problems. And this photograph is also the background for this presentation. I took this shot in January on a bad ozone day, and you can see, the terrible blanket of air pollution that sits in that geographic valley I was just describing. And the American Lung Association released its State of the Air report last month. Las Vegas got even worse. Las Vegas, the last State of the Air report had the 10th worst air in the United States for ozone. And now in 2020, we have the 9th worst air in the United States for ozone. And that's the worst ozone level in the county since 2002. And the county has made many kind of lame attempts to write this off, saying how much they've improved the air quality. But the bottom line is it's terribly polluted air here. And I'm sure you all are well aware of that living in the valley. And additionally, Las Vegas is heating faster than any other city in the United States. These are some graphs looking at the low and high temperatures, how they have shifted since 1985 until 2010, and obviously it's heated still since 2010, but Las Vegas is heating dramatically, and part of why that is our transportation carbon emissions. So the consequences of our pattern of urban development in Southern Nevada are many miles traveled. There's a metric called VMTs, vehicle miles traveled. And Las Vegas has a high VMT for commuters due to the patterns of development. And this is partially responsible for climate change and the warming that we've seen here in Southern Nevada. Additionally, the patterns of development have resulted in a significant urban heat island effect. So Las Vegas is much hotter than it would otherwise be because of the sprawl development that we've experienced here. And this is a graphic I pulled off the web. They say Las Vegas is up to 24 degrees hotter than in nearby undeveloped areas. And, you really experience this at night, especially, where Las Vegas just doesn't cool off at night. And as was said earlier, I live out in Pahrump, and some nights will be 20 degrees cooler than Las Vegas, which is very pleasant out here, but is something that you all, experience there in Las Vegas in a pretty tangible and real fashion. And so that's visible, especially in areas of development with the highest pavement, the most blacktop exposed to the sun. And so this is the temperature trend in degrees Celsius per year, averaged over, I think, since 1985, as I said earlier. So you can see actually some places in the city, particularly down in Henderson and out in Summerlin, have gotten incrementally cooler by just a small amount. And that is because in affluent areas, people tend to plant trees. Developers tend to plant and irrigate trees. Whereas in less affluent areas, more urbanized areas, more commercial areas, tend to be fewer trees, more bare pavement, and that urban heat island effect is really exacerbated. And you can see that here in the core of urban Las Vegas, experiencing the urban heat island effect. I want to shift focus for a few minutes to look at the desert tortoise. And the desert tortoise, you all are familiar with, of course. It's an icon of the Mojave Desert. And it has really been a primary driver of conservation in southern Nevada for 30 years. The tortoise was listed under the Endangered Species Act as threatened in 1990. And then critical habitat units were designated across the Mojave Desert from St. George all the way down to even into the Colorado Desert in California to protect this species. It's thought that the tortoise is really a keystone species of the Mojave Desert ecosystem. And if the tortoise goes, it really tells us that our ecosystems in the Mojave Desert are in catastrophic collapse. And so when we're talking about urban growth in southern Nevada, the tortoise presents the most significant constraint on urban growth here. And so the fate of the tortoise is indelibly tied to the decisions we make about land use here in southern Nevada. So I'm going to share with you some monitoring data from the desert tortoise. This is all from 2004 to 2014, when Fish and Wildlife Service did an intensive set of monitoring data collection. So this is the whole range of the desert tortoise from, as I said, the Colorado Desert in southern California, southeast California, all the way up to St. George in the Upper Virgin River populations, and then west out toward Lancaster and Palmdale in the West Mojave. And so these are population trends for the desert tortoise. And you can see things are in rough shape here. So this is percent change per year through that 10-year period. And you can see the Fenner Valley population in the southern Mojave is in catastrophic collapse. It's lost 10% per year of its population. It's just terrifying population declines. You can see many other units are in a more modest but still a state of decline. Between 5 and 10% is most of the units there in the West Mojave, in southern Nevada, parts of southern Nevada, the Shadow Valley, Kingston area, etc. I'm sorry about that. I had a video pulled up to show you later, and some ad came up. So sorry about that. Back to the presentation. You can see that some population units, however, are experiencing population increases. So in particular, that's the Mormon Mesa and Beaver Dam Slope populations, as well as the Gold Butte Pacoon populations. The Paiute Valley in the southern tip of Nevada, and then in Joshua Tree National Park. And so, you know, one of the things this tells us is that Nevada's desert tortoises are absolutely critical to the future of the species. We know that climate is affecting, obviously, all species in the desert, and the trend is that the viable habitat for species is moving poleward. In other words, towards the North Pole, or in the southern hemisphere, it'd be toward the South Pole. But as temperatures increase, they increase more toward the equator. So the suitable habitat for species is moving northward in the northern hemisphere. And thus, the existing populations in the northern part of the tortoise's range are of central importance to conservation there. Now, this next slide is a little more complicated, but it is perhaps the most ominous. There is a minimum viability density for tortoise populations. And that number is 3.9 tortoises per square kilometer. And so you can think about there's basically 4 tortoises in any square kilometer. That is the minimum density at which they can reproduce reliably. If there are fewer than 4 tortoises per square kilometer, basically the male tortoises will wander around their whole lives and never find a female to mate with. Actually very sad. So when we experience population units with far less than 4 tortoises per square kilometer, those are population units that are dramatically trending toward extinction. You can almost say that the tortoises alive right now in those population units may be the last tortoises there, and that tortoises will be extirpated within those population units within our lifetimes. And so you can see here, the red units have between 1.5 and 2.7 tortoises per square kilometer. So you're looking at the full-scale extirpation of desert tortoises in the West Mojave. You're looking at the extirpation in the El Dorado Valley in Nevada, the Shadow Valley in California. So just the direst of circumstances for the desert tortoise in those areas. Things are also fairly grim in the Chocolate Mountains, in the Fenner Valley, and the Ward Valley area, and in Gold Butte. Things are very grim. That's between 2.8 and 3.7 tortoises per square kilometer, so below viability. Now we have viable populations in Joshua Tree, in the Paiute Valley, and often in Mojave Preserve, and then Mormon Mesa and the Beaver Dam Slope. Those are all between 4 and 7.2 tortoises per square kilometer. And then the Upper Virgin River up by St. George is just an incredibly robust population, at 15.3 tortoises per square kilometer. And that indeed is the northernmost population of the desert tortoise. So things are very grim for the desert tortoise. And it just reinforces that here in Nevada, you know, we need to do everything we can to protect the tortoise. And this is from a review of the data in 2018. Negative population trends in most of the tortoise conservation areas indicate this species is on the path to extinction. There's a lot of reasons for this. Invasive species is one. Here's a tortoise surrounded by red brome. You know, all of the native forbs that this tortoise relies on for food and water are choked out by red brome. Ravens are a huge piece of this. Raven predation is almost the #1 killer of small tortoises. Off-highway vehicles use is a significant factor. And then human disturbance, vehicles, even hikers, disturbing tortoises affects them. But nothing, really nothing, is affecting the tortoise as much as habitat loss. And certainly one of the most high-profile causes of habitat loss for the Mojave Desert tortoise, especially up here in the North Mojave, down near the state line and then up along the I-15 corridor, is utility-scale solar. And that has really eaten up many tens of thousands of high-quality habitat between the North and West Mojave in the past decade. But we also know that urbanization is another extremely significant driver of habitat loss for the desert tortoise. And that's here in Las Vegas, certainly. It's up in St. George, certainly the Victorville area, the Victor Valley in California, and then the Antelope Valley, the Palmdale Lancaster area in the West Mojave. All those areas have experienced tremendous urban growth, which is driving population declines for the Mojave Desert tortoise. So as a result, here in Clark County, we have what's called an HCP, a Habitat Conservation Plan for the desert tortoise. And this really drives both the constraints on development that I referred to earlier and conservation for the tortoise. And in particular, the county took certain actions under the HCP that conserve the desert tortoise. Most notably, they retired a number of grazing leases within tortoise habitat, since cows and tortoises don't get along. But they took other actions as well. And in exchange, the county received a mitigation bank of land that could be developed on desert tortoise habitat that was mitigated by these actions under the HCP. And that has really allowed for the growth of the Las Vegas Valley, which is all desert tortoise habitat. That is how the county is allowed to destroy habitat for the desert tortoise, because the idea is it has adequately compensated the overall population of tortoises through conservation actions in other areas. And so the MSHCP, the Multi-Species Habitat Conservation Plan, was passed in 2001. It was signed in 2001. It was a 30-year plan, so there's 11 years left on it. And it gave the county about 145,000 acres of development. There is approximately 30,000 acres left on that MSHCP. There is a thought that the MSHCP needs to be revised sooner rather than later, and that both years need to be added onto it and acreage needs to be added onto it. And that brings us to the Clark County Lands Bill. And I think I've been talking for a while, so we're gonna give video a shot here to share a video with you about the Lands Bill. I'm gonna have to unshare and then reshare. We'll see if this works here. Presenting. From tab.
More and more people are visiting the valley. More and more are moving to town. So how does Southern Nevada stay economically and environmentally viable?
Nevada was born during battle. One of two states added to the Union during the Civil War. Since 1864, from the Silver Strikes to the Hoover Dam to gaming, there has been one constant: the winds of change.
A lot of Southern Nevadans, if they just remember back to their childhood, will remember more birds singing in the spring.
The Southern Nevada soundtrack now has less of this and more of this. If you were around in the East Side, birds and there are not.
And like we are in middle extinction.
Some hundreds of bird species in Nevada are on.
Actually, in the broke in if had bird foundation of the land and all that.
And he's against the county expansion project.
Biodiversity is clean water. Biodiversity is what gives us food to eat. If we destroy our biodiversity, if bird populations continue to crash, if we continue to destroy habitat, eventually we're jeopardizing our own existence on this earth. So as goes the birds, so goes our own fate.
Well, we've been working on it for 2 years.
Okay, I'm hearing that the video stopped working, so I'm sorry to hear that. It's a good video. I'll make sure you all get the link and you can watch it at a different time, but we'll just get back to the presentation. The best part of the video is they went out to Hidden Valley, which is an area proposed for expansion under the Clark County bill, and they did some CGI of houses sprouting from the ground in virgin desert habitat. So that was pretty nice. But we'll just get back to the presentation. Getting to the Clark County Lands Bill proposal. So the origin of this proposal came from this idea that we need to expand the developable acreage under the HCP. So Clark County wants to expand that mitigation bank. And they started looking around at, well, what mitigation could we do to qualify for that expansion? And they basically had run out of good mitigation to do on their own. And so it appears now that excuse me, I'm going to... the best way to do it was through federal legislation. And so what they had come up with was the protection of areas of critical environmental concern, ACECs. These were public lands, BLM lands, that would be set aside for conservation. And so you can see these are ACECs that the county had proposed across Clark County, including the Stump Springs expansion, which is a significant portion of the Pahrump Valley, Bird Spring Valley, which is near Red Rock Canyon National Conservation Area, Bitter Springs, which is adjoining Lake Mead, NRA, and part of the Muddy Mountains there, as well as a number of other smaller areas. So these were ACECs, areas of critical environmental concern, that were proposed by the county. In a more recent draft of the bill introduced by Senator Cortez Masto, which we'll talk about, she actually has slightly more ACECs designated in that version of the bill. However, there's no such thing as a free lunch. The county's not just designating these things for fun. They also included in their text of the bill a legislative revision of the MSHCP. This is important because the MSHCP is an administrative document subject to environmental review. So the county and the Fish and Wildlife Service draw up the MSHCP, and then it goes through an environmental review process. So there's public comment, there's comments on a draft of it, they do a final, and it's litigatable by us. You know, if you know anything about my organization, you know we sue people. And, you know, if they don't follow the law revising the MSHCP, we can sue them. Well, the county's trying to get around all that. And so they had proposed to include in their bill that they should get a credit on an acre for acre basis for those ACECs being designated. So that would give them, at least in this particular draft of the bill, another 250,000 acres added to their mitigation bank under the MSHCP. Now, to tell you how much that is, right now the Las Vegas Valley's urban footprint is about 250,000 acres. So this provision, this protection of these ACECs, would have allowed them to double the size of the city of Las Vegas, which is just, you know, pretty unfathomable, I think, for most of us who live around here to think about Las Vegas being twice the size it is right now. And this is conjoined with that, they proposed expanding the disposal boundary. So the areas of public land that could be sold for development. And you can see the current disposal boundary is a checked line, and then the shaded area is the new disposal boundary. And so you can see the vast majority of the expansion would go southward toward the California border south of I-15. And so you can see all that expansion there. That includes the Jean Valley, so the area north, east, and somewhat south of Jean, and then a place called Hidden Valley, which is up against Sloan Canyon National Conservation Area. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The bill would also designate off-highway vehicle areas. These would be areas where off-highway vehicle recreation is prioritized. Basically, the OHVers got all upset that Clark County wanted to put subdivisions in Jean Valley where they run the Mint 400 race and a bunch of other off-highway vehicle events. So the county threw them a bone and tried to include these OHV areas in the bill. So these include part of the Ivanpah Valley and the area near Sandy Valley. It includes an area near Laughlin, includes an area near Logandale and Overton. And then most controversially, it includes a significant portion of the El Dorado Valley and the area near Nelson, part of which is desert tortoise critical habitat, which is extremely problematic for us, turning desert tortoise critical habitat into an off-highway vehicle area. Another provision would expand the Moapa River Indian Reservation, northeast of Las Vegas. This would give the Moapas more land on their reservation. Theoretically, not a bad thing. Much of it would probably end up getting turned into solar farms, since the Moapa Reservation has prioritized solar development. So, there's that. There was also quite a bit of furor about some language which might have, in a backdoor way, authorized the Las Vegas pipeline. There were certain authorizations of rights of way and certain conveyances of land which would not be subject to further administrative or judicial review and granted in perpetuity. So while this language didn't exactly say it would authorize the pipeline, we felt that it really opened the door to authorizing the pipeline. And so this has brought in the whole water contingent, the Nevada water contingent, in terms of getting involved on this legislation. The bill also included RPP leases, they're called, recreation and public purpose leases. So there's leases all over the valley for recreation and public purposes where the county uses BLM land for public purposes. So, for instance, many schools in the valley, many fire stations, ambulance stations, parks are actually set on BLM land. Now, it's BLM land that has been leased to the county under the RPP program. And the county has asked for those RPP leases to be transferred to them permanently through the bill. The last component on the bill is wilderness. Now, in the initial formulation of the bill, the county only proposed one wilderness area, the Mount Sterling Wilderness. Friends of Nevada Wilderness, who many of you are familiar with, countered with their wilderness proposal, which you can see on this map. It's all the blue areas. So Friends of Nevada Wilderness actually proposed a really significant piece of wilderness. In the end, Senator Cortez Masto in her legislation didn't give everything that Friends asked for, but did put some significant amounts of wilderness in that legislation. So, going back to the overview of the bill, we can see there's a real mixed bag. There's the kind of going around the Endangered Species Act by revising the MSHCP and protecting these quote-unquote mitigation lands, which we find very problematic. The disposal boundary expansion, again, problematic. OHV areas, problematic. Pipeline provisions, problematic. But, the Moapa Reservation expansion, probably don't have a real concern with. And the RPP lease transfers is fine. I mean, if we want to give some elementary schools to the county, I think that's no big deal. The wilderness, I mean, we generally support wilderness, but at what cost? What we've seen is that groups who prioritize wilderness are so excited about getting some wilderness out of this deal that they haven't fought back against the sprawl. And that's really the thing here. This bill would dramatically expand sprawl in Clark County. And that brings with it all sorts of problems. As we said earlier, there's problems with air pollution, problems with climate, problems with water supply, you know, issues that have nothing to do with public lands. And so I think there have been some entities who want to view this bill through the lens of public lands, whereas it's really, it's a bill about growth. It asks the question, how should we grow, and provides the answer onto public lands, as opposed to just asking the question, how should we grow, and finding new and interesting answers to that question. It's the same old, let's sell off some public lands and sprawl out. So in June of 2018, this came before the Clark County Commission, and they approved a resolution supporting this. Then we petitioned some plants in 2019, which we'll talk about in a second. In January of 2020, Senator Cortez Masto released a discussion draft. So this is not introduced legislation. No legislation has been introduced before Congress, but there has been a discussion draft put out by Cortez Masto, presumably having her imprimatur on it. So, you know, I think a lot of times we think of, oh, it's just Republicans who want to sell off public land and so forth. But no, this is entirely Democrats backing this bill. And you know, we think the reason there's been this push is because folks are probably familiar that the Air Force is proposing to take over part of the desert refuge. The Air Force is going to have some sort of bill in the National Defense Authorization Act this year. That's the military budget legislation that Congress must pass. So the idea is that this Clark County bill could be hitched to that wagon and get through in must-pass military legislation, which is a really underhanded way, we feel like, of making public policy. But that's been why there's been this push in the past couple of years. It was all in preparation for the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, this year. So when it came before the county commission last year, it was extremely controversial. A lot of ink was spilled about this proposal. Certainly Henry Breen and Daniel Rothberg at the Independent and the Review Journal were bird dogging it quite a bit. We had Sheldon Adelson editorializing in favor of the Clark County lands bill, because no one likes a good public land sell-off like Sheldon Adelson, which is just, it's just funny. You know, we have sprawl legislation being backed by the Democrats on the Clark County Commission and Senator Cortez Masto and Sheldon Adelson. So very ironic. I've written a couple op-eds about this thing, and I call it a wish list for privatizers. And then finally there was this public meeting for the bill, which was extremely controversial. There were hundreds of people there, you know, the vast majority of people spoke out against this bill. Now, I mentioned the expanded disposal boundaries south of the city. This is part of where the desert tortoise comes in. This is a tortoise habitat suitability model. And this area we're depicting here is Jean Valley on the south side of this map to the left. And you can see Jean Dry Lake, and I-15 is running kind of diagonally toward the southwest. And then Hidden Valley, which is just to the east of there. You can see Hidden Valley is kind of part of that disposal boundary too. And they have basically chosen the highest quality desert tortoise habitat for their disposal. And this is 44,000 acres of land. You know, the tortoise can't stand us continuing to eat up its habitat for sprawl and industrial development. It's just not, it's incompatible with the tortoise's future as a species. And so eating up this high quality habitat is extremely problematic. Part of our pushback has been to look at what species are threatened. And one of them is the Las Vegas bear poppy. The Las Vegas bear poppy is a rare flower that lives here in southern Nevada. And interestingly, it has an obligate pollinator called the Mojave poppy bee. And so we petitioned to protect the Mojave poppy bee and to Fish and Wildlife Service to protect it under the Endangered Species Act. And subsequent to that, here's the poppy bee doing its little dance here. Sorry for the sound. That's kind of cute. So after that, we petitioned for the Las Vegas bear poppy to also be protected under the Endangered Species Act. Simultaneously, we are examining a petition for the white margin beard tongue, another endemic flower that lives only in southern Nevada and a couple other locations. And in particular, it lives in Hidden Valley itself. And so, you know, these rare species that live in very few isolated populations are very vulnerable to extinction. And we feel that industrial and urban sprawl should not take a priority over native biodiversity. This is another video clip. Last September, Fish and Wildlife Service gave us a positive finding on our Mojave poppy bee petition. So that was a very promising first step for protecting that species. And we kind of assume the Las Vegas bear poppy is also going to get a positive initial finding, although there's other steps to be completed before they're protected. You know, meanwhile, we really feel like this bill is greenwashing. You know, they're trying to protect some land in one place to do urban sprawl elsewhere, and those just are not commensurate things. Protecting some tortoise habitat does not eliminate climate change. Protecting tortoise habitat doesn't clean our air or protect our drinking water supply. So while we think tortoise habitat should be protected, they're not commensurate impacts. You know, it's not commensurate mitigation with the impacts of sprawl. And meanwhile, we don't need to sprawl. Here's a map we created of the current SNPLMA boundary showing developed and undeveloped land. You can see a huge amount of our valley is undeveloped still within the SNPLMA boundary. It's almost 100,000 acres of undeveloped land still. So if we need to figure out permitting to develop that 100,000 acres, that's what we need to do. We need to prioritize infill development within this valley in order to protect our ecosystems and protect our air and climate. So in February, a really unprecedented group of environmental justice and social justice advocates got together and wrote Senator Cortez Masto a letter saying, we oppose this bill. We oppose the move to dramatically increase sprawl in Las Vegas and destroy habitat and destroy our air quality and climate. And you can see this is environmental groups, this is climate groups, and this is social justice groups. Mi Familia Vota and Make the Road Nevada focus on social justice. Plan is a social justice group. And so we really feel like that connection is very important, because who experiences the impacts of air pollution and climate change the most? Low-income communities, communities of color. And so they need representation in this discussion too. This isn't just a public lands discussion. And so this was a very important moment, I think, that letter going in. So what can you do? You know, certainly we would love for your organization, Red Rock Audubon, to write a letter to our elected officials expressing your concern about the sprawl, about expanding the disposal boundary and increasing sprawl. But personal outreach also makes a huge difference from individuals, from all 17 of you on the call today, and everyone else watching. Individual outreach makes a huge difference. Our primary targets are Senator Cortez Masto. She's really taken the lead on this whole thing. Representative Titus has taken the lead in the House side, and Commissioner Justin Jones has taken the lead on the commission. Now, you think of these folks and you think, oh, they're good on the environment. And generally they are. I mean, we think of these folks as environmentalists. And that's what has made this such a difficult issue, because it's people who are normally environmental champions who are championing sprawl, who are championing environmental destruction. And so, you know, I think we need to really share with them that we support them and what they do because they fight for the environment, but that fighting for the environment in one stance doesn't necessarily make up for supporting sprawl and sprawl development. Other targets include Senator Rosen, Representatives Lee and Horsford, and County Commissioners Naft and Kirkpatrick. They should also be hearing from us. We would love to get some letters to the editor or op-eds from people who care about these issues, like folks on this call. Certainly, if you join our mailing list at biologicaldiversity.org, we'll clue you in when we have action alerts or other requests for action on this. Follow us on Twitter. Follow the Climate Justice Coalition and Center for Biological Diversity and myself. And you can always email me if you're looking for help on letters, help on contacting elected officials, writing a letter to the editor, or anything like that. But this is an issue that people have made a huge difference. Some of the worst portions of the bill have been taken out in Senator Cortez Masto's draft, including the pipeline section and others. And so action from individuals, from organizations like yours, like mine, really does make a difference and can materially affect the outcome of this issue. So I'd encourage you to get involved and fight back, keep Las Vegas in the Las Vegas Valley, and let's chart a different course for growth and development in Southern Nevada. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Well, Patrick, thank you so much. Before I turn this over to some questions, I do want to also bring this whole context of this presentation to birds and what it means. One, we will have support from National Audubon to oppose this particular bill. We'll talk with a national organization. But if you think about, for me, the way I think about it is, remember the work that was done by National Audubon called Survival Species, right? Or the Climate Report 2.0. It talks about air, water, and also temperature. When we think about birds, we think about their body temperature. It's not that much higher than our body temperature. And their proteins react to temperature just like ours. They don't have as much tolerance as we do. So if you think about birds migrating through here, they migrate mainly at night because it's cooler. And if you, what Patrick brings up is not just the temperature around here going up, but it's the night temperature going up. And think about these birds migrating through, and think about, my vision is, this picture of them flying through this hot oven, right? They need to cool off, and if they can't, they die. If it's marginal, it just means that they can't fly as far. So there are a significant impact, not just to the desert tortoise and our desert plants, but also these birds that are flying through. There is going to be significant impact as the temperature of this urban area goes up. So the other element to kind of think through is this pandemic that's come through our world has significantly eaten up our city, our county, our state, our individual budgets, right? Our assets. So we're going to be in a hurt in terms of money. So guess what? These governments are going to be looking for sources of revenue, and one of the things will be going out and selling more land. So what Patrick has proposed to us is a climate question and also an urban sprawl question. We now, over the last few weeks, have seen our community, and we have seen the impact, the positive impact on our air, because the VMT is lower. So I think our job over the next few months, with and Janice, I'm so glad you're on a call, is to look at this data that Patrick shared with us, look at the data around the climate report, and start
Yes,
together a plan as a Red Rock Audubon in dealing with these climate issues on our community. So that's my kind of takeaway from this. And thank you, Patrick. So I'm going to open this up to people with questions.
We don't have many questions in the chat, but I think we don't have that many people on the call. So if you'd like to just unmute your microphone and ask your question to Patrick, that would probably work.
Hi, it's Janice. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Janice.
Okay, that's great. Patrick, because we're not in the same room together, can I ask what organization you are from?
Yeah, I'm with the Center for Biological Diversity. We're a nationwide nonprofit. I'm our Nevada director, and we're headquartered in Tucson. We've been around for 31 years, staff across the country, and we've been in Nevada for about 12 years. Some of you know my predecessor, Rob Maraca.
Okay, so have your organization and perhaps the Audubon Society, if we went to our legislators as a team, did you ever consider something like that?
We have a broad coalition working on this. If Audubon wants to get involved, that would be great.
Yeah. I don't know, Doug, what's your idea?
It's okay, Chloe. Oh.
His mute button is on.
No, I'm here. You were cutting in and out.
Okay.
I think, Janice, you're asking whether we can be part of the coalition, correct? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just to, if we go and visit our legislators, can we go as a team?
Absolutely.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah, that's what I think one of the reasons why we wanted to have this information presented to you at this meeting is so that we can spend the next few months really start thinking about how do we build it into our advocacy group that you would like us to create. Right, Janice?
Yes, and Andrea. Andrea, are you on the list here? Hello, Andrea?
Yeah, sorry, it took me a second to find my mute button. Yes, I would love to continue to be involved. I actually have a question for Patrick too, when the time is right.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Apologies if you said this, Patrick, but what is the argument kind of the Cortez Masto and all the other affiliates on this legislation bill push for sprawl instead of the infill? I've never understood that, because the infill is so, like, the empty spots inside our city boundaries are always really apparent, always just, even if people don't care about the environment, they're kind of awful garbage collecting kind of, vacant lots with no sidewalks and no shade. And I'm just wondering, why don't those get developed?
Well, that's the whole thing about greenwashing. They don't talk about it. They don't talk about the sprawl, and that goes for the other environmental groups too. There are a handful of environmental groups in this state who support this legislation, and they don't talk about the sprawl. In fact, the only really straight answer we've ever gotten on that was in that video clip, which unfortunately didn't work, where Marilyn Kirkpatrick, who's the Clark County Commission chair, she says, well, a master developer or a developer can't get a huge block of acreage, several thousand acres, all together in the valley very easily to put a master plan community. So if you want to build another Summerlin, to go out in the desert to do it, because there's not a contiguous block of 10, 15,000 acres available in the Las Vegas Valley. So that may be true, but that really emphasizes that this thing is a monster giveaway to developers. And that's the purpose. The purpose is so that Howard Hughes Corporation or Del Webb or whoever can go out in the middle of nowhere and plop down another Summerlin.
I don't think we need another Summerlin.
Absolutely not.
Do you
Does-
have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, Patrick. I have a question. You know, even if we were to stop this growth, say we were to stop it tomorrow, you know, we still have all this. You know, the VMT is pushing for more a better public transportation system. Something that we should also be doing.
Well, the Climate Justice Coalition I mentioned earlier, you know, we're working on a proposal for a Green New Deal for Nevada. And that's exactly the types of stuff we're going to be using. We need a dramatic rethinking of our whole urban development and growth style. So that means transit-oriented communities. That means a massive investment in public transit. I mean, we ought to have light rail in the middle of every highway in the city, you know, in addition to other corridors. You know, we should make it such that people don't need their cars in Las Vegas. And that is entirely possible if that's what we choose to prioritize our planning and expenditure. It's a matter of, but absolutely, you know, we are trying to not just fight this, but put forward a positive vision.
Yeah, and Therese is asking what VMT is. So that's vehicle miles traveled, Therese. She asked that in the chat. Does anybody else have any questions? Doug, it sounded like you had one.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask about VMT.
Anyone else have a question for Patrick while we have him here?
Yes, I have one more question. It's Janice again. Do you know if the land is for sale now that these big developers want to take over? Do you know if it's for sale now, or they already own the property?
I'm not really sure what you're asking.
Well, coming from Long Island, we ran out of open space. And there was a group of very, very wealthy people that got together and is buying up on the North Shore of Long Island. They're buying up acreage just to keep the developers at bay. So what I'm saying is I'd like to find out what property that the developers are looking at to take over and expand, like to make another Summerlin, if that land is available for purchase.
That's what we're trying to stop. That land is currently public land, so that's owned by you and me and everyone on this call. And you know, we think it ought to stay public and not be purchased up by developers.
You and I both know we don't have lobbyists. Only the big developers and people with bucks have lobbyists. It's just another avenue. I'd like to give it a little more thought. How to prevent them from taking it. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Does anybody else have any questions for Patrick?
Yeah, I do. Hi, can you hear me?
We sure can. Go ahead.
Okay. Patrick, first of all, thank you so much. Just amazing, excellent presentation. Also, I wanted to know what is the official title of this bill, or is there more than one bill? Is it like Senate bill number whatever, or what is? So when like we're corresponding or whatever with elected officials, what do we call it so that we all know? They all know what exactly it is we're talking about.
Yeah, it's not been introduced, so it's just a draft bill right now. So you just call it the Clark County Lands Bill. Everyone knows what you mean when you say Clark County Lands Bill. But you know, that's the whole thing. Once it's introduced, we're in big trouble. So we're trying to keep it from ever being introduced because you know, that would really be close to the end on this thing.
Okay, thanks.
And looks like Andrea has a question in the chat here. What is the timeline for needing to comment before fall migratory bill?
Yeah,
Sorry, fall military bill. Sorry.
Certainly very soon. This thing was moving at a much faster pace a couple months ago, and then obviously, the pandemic and everything got derailed. Fall is when the kind of final action happens, the end game of this whole drama. So hearing from people now and over the summer is the critical time.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, this is Patrick. In our community, is there consensus among our conservation groups like Sierra Club, Nature Conservancy, Friends of Nevada Wilderness in terms of opposing this bill? You had a coalition, but I didn't see these folks as part of the coalition to oppose this bill.
Yeah, hey, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, Nevada Conservation League supports this bill. So okay. If you want to, if you're a member of Nevada Conservation League, you should go ask them why they support sprawl. Friends of Nevada Wilderness, their attack is they support the wilderness and they don't say anything about the sprawl. So it's kind of tacit support because they're not opposing it. I think those groups, logos of, we oppose this bill, period. If we want to protect wilderness, we should just go protect wilderness because it's the right thing to do. Not as a quid pro quo with the real estate development community. And so, no, there's not consensus about it. It's controversial. It's very controversial. Ultimately, we're taking a stand on behalf of the climate and the air and wildlife and public lands. And, if other folks are reaching different conclusions about the right way to proceed, well, that's their choice. But, we're very clear as to who our constituency is. Our constituency is the desert tortoise and underprivileged and marginalized communities. That's who we're fighting for. And so, I don't know who other folks are fighting for. It is controversial. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yes, thank you. Patrick, the way I see this, we've all been, we're sold this notion that we need to support these green renewable energy, in which I do support these things, but it seems to me the biggest problem here is just this unchecked consumption, just unchecked growth that just ever consuming, and it's getting to the point where our planet just can't sustain this. And until we realize that, we're headed down a bad path here. So thank you for bringing this to our attention.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Kathy.
Hi, it's Kathy. If I understand correctly, the call to action is writing the letters, joining forces as Red Rock writing letters as individuals. Patrick, is there anything else, say, urgent call to action you want to make us aware of?
I mean, that's pretty much what we can do right now, is write letters to the other big thing to, get this in the newspaper. Is an important one too. So letters to the editor and op-eds. If we could go to Clark County Commission meetings, showing up at those meetings and saying, hey, we don't want this to happen, would be useful too. But that's not an option right now. So right now, the written word is our best form of outreach at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
So we've had a couple of questions. Kevin is asking, he apparently missed part of the recording. So the meeting here. So yes, this it is being recorded. We will post it on our website and on our social media. So that should be, we'll have it on the website hopefully later today or by tomorrow. And Irma, I think you just asked the question about letters. So Irma was asking, can our Red Rock Audubon write letters and collect signatures to the commission? So yes, we can do that, and we will.
Okay, if there are no other questions, Patrick, again, thank you so much for bringing this information to us. I think when you hear the comments here, I think you have a receptive group. We have to now kind of think about what do we do with this information you shared with us. And we'll probably, Paul, we'll probably get back with you also before we finalize the stuff that we want to do. So again, thank you so much. There were a lot of things that I think many of us didn't realize was happening around our community. And I think my sense is many people probably don't want us to know, right?
Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the good questions, and I appreciate all that Red Rock Audubon does. So thank you very much.
Cool. So everybody.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick. So thank you for joining us this morning, and stay safe. Keep an ear and eyes out for all the changes that are going to be coming down in the next few weeks, and do our best to take care of each other. So have a great rest of the Saturday and this weekend. We'll see you later. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
That was cool. I like that.
Yes, I did.
Very nice.